heard it here first, James. You heard it here first. Joy, you have heard it here first. Slick, there will be a problem in Golden State. Yeah. It is very, very, very hard. It is actually inhumane, I would say, to expect a 12-time, I believe, All-Star in Chris Paul, in excess of 10-time All-Star and 10 times All-NBA player to be content, to be ecstatic, to be elated, to even be okay and complicit with now coming off of the bench. The moment that Chris Paul got traded to Golden State, James, I literally said to LeSean McCoy, I said, hey, big dog, it's hard for a tree to become a seed. It is hard for somebody who is a bona fide superstar over the course of his NBA career to now ride the bench regardless of who he is riding the bench for. Yeah. But we hadn't heard Chris Paul from his own mouth utter any sort of feelings about it either way. Now he gets to ask the question, well, Chris, you know, how do you feel about the bench players that you'll be having to play for? Yeah. You coaching? Oh, yeah. Like, it was assumed, CP, you were coming off the bench. Common sense says you're a point guard. Steph Curry's a point guard. Steph is currently better than you. You're going to be backing him up. I know that. You know that. Joy knows that. Slick knows that. But for whatever reason, Chris Paul doesn't seem to know that, or at least be okay with it. Yeah. Should you be worried? Are you worried? Should Warriors fans, NBA fans, be worried about Chris Paul and the Warriors?
I'm actually not worried about Chris Paul and the Warriors because I saw them make it work with Kevin Durant. All right? Steph Curry and Steve Kerr and Draymond Green are going to find a way to make Chris Paul comfortable in whatever they're asking him to do. They will make room. They will massage that. The problem is going to be who he was talking to. The media. Because that's who he snapped on. Well, don't go making assumptions about me. Yeah. Now, why is that a problem? It's because Steph Curry, Draymond Green, the stars of that team, have had an amazing relationship with the media. True. Why? Because they're always thoughtful. They're always insightful. They're not... Chris Paul came off as guarded. Wait, whoa. And then, we haven't had the conversation. Like, he's playing games. What I know about Steph and Draymond and those guys, whatever you think about them, they don't play games. They give you thoughtful, this is kind of what's going on, this is what we're struggling with. They're very honest and upfront. So if Chris Paul is not that, it reminds me of where things went south with Kevin Durant. Because the problem really wasn't, as much as people want to put it on Draymond Green, it wasn't Kevin Durant's issue with Draymond or Steph or any of those guys. His issue was how the media and the fans viewed him. They saw him as second to Steph. Well, if Chris Paul is going to feel like, oh, wait a minute, the media is treating me like I'm second to Steph, that's the same issue that ran KD out of town. So that's where I see the problem. Not the Warriors having an issue, not Chris Paul having an issue with the Warriors, Chris Paul having an issue with how the media and the fans perceive his role with the Golden State.
Break it down for me, Joy. Break it down for me, Joy. Where do you stand?
Ooh. I will say, I really love Summer League. We're getting lots of uncensored quotes. They are not in mid-season coach speak form out there in Vegas, and I personally appreciate it, especially this time of year. So keep that up. Keep them coming. Oh, I don't love it. I don't love it. I thought this was understood. That's why it's a kind of
Say that again? You thought it was what?
I thought it was understood what the role was going to be. And roles are very important. I am a big believer in roles playing a part in any type of situation being successful. A family needs roles. Organizations need roles. Any kind of partnership that you have, you're supposed to do the best of what you do. You don't need to do the best at what I do because I have a role to play. And you can't be everybody everywhere. And usually when you see organizations or situations where someone tries to be everybody everywhere, it fails. So that's the thing that concerns me about it, because I do see this as something that could be successful if he plays the role that they brought him in to play. I do hear you, though. This isn't just some guy.
No.
So it will really be interesting to see if that's the permeating attitude throughout the regular season, because I was assuming that, and I guess, they say when you assume, that this was not going to be a part of the dialogue.
Right. Yeah, well, this is concerning, number one, that the conversation ain't been had yet. You got what I'm saying? Because obviously the way he responded, he ain't had this conversation with Steve Kerr and management and all that people that's running this team, right? Number two, you hit on it. 12-time All-Star, right? A member of the All-75 team, right? But the thing that sticks out to me most is never did not start a game in his career. Never did not start a game. Over 1,000+ games he has played, he has never come off the bench. You know what Chris Paul just said? You know that lady on TikTok? Get somebody else to do it. That's basically what he's saying. Get somebody else to do it. I am not coming off the bench.
Jay, I got to interrupt you. I have to interrupt you. I'm loving this conversation. That's why I wanted to lead with it. If there was something better to lead with, we would have done that. Jay, I don't think people understand, and Joy, you and I have had many conversations about ego. Ego can be the detriment to so many great things. Never let ego get in the way of your progress. But in the same times, often an ego is what makes an athlete great. And ego causes an athlete to believe they are better than they actually are, which leads them to perform better than they actually are capable of. Ego serves so many athletes. If you at home don't realize, Chris Paul has an NBA record consecutive games started. Literally since the merger, he has started more games than any other player in the history of the game of basketball to start a career. More than anybody else. If you don't think he doesn't realize that, that's one mistake you've already made. Secondarily, Chris Paul is still a top 10, top 12 point guard playing right now. Last time I checked, there's 30 teams. And you want me to come off the bench? I remember talking football and basketball. I love this show because we do both. I remember when Eli Manning's record for most games started was going to be collapsed. Huge deal. Not just to the media, but even privately to Eli. Huge deal. Like, wait, you want me to come off the bench? Like me? I started this many games. You want, like, that is and attest to this, that is literally a beacon of an unspoken trophy that athletes hold on to. Is consecutive games started. So, Slick, this is not going to, if it does happen, it's not going over well.
I respectfully, I disagree, because I believe...
With what aspect?
With the idea that he's not going to accept coming off the bench. Because I think if there's any team that is positioned to make the argument why, if that's what it comes down to. And normally, I would agree with you, James, 1,000%. Wait a minute, you haven't had this conversation yet? My career started covering the Golden State Warriors when they drafted Chris Webber. And they didn't tell him when they drafted him, we plan on playing you at center. And he's like, wait a minute, I got to play against Shaq. I got to play Hakeem. I got to play against, like, no, I'm a power forward. I want to be the next Charles Barkley. That was an issue. But in this case, it's a nuanced conversation in terms of Steph Curry came off the bench at the start of the playoffs, and they won a championship. Draymond Green has come off the bench.
Different, though.
Manu Ginobili just went into the Hall of Fame. Spent his career coming up. So this is the question that you have to ask Chris Paul.
I'm waiting for it.
And I would
ask him what Kendra asked him, though. I don't want him to snap at me. I don't want him to yell at me.
Yeah, well, I don't know that I would ask the question either. I'll let the Warriors ask the question, which is, what do you want? Do you want the consecutive streak? Do you want to be a starter? Or do you want to win a championship?
Ooh, talk about it, Rick.
Because everybody's got to make sacrifices. So if that's the one thing that you've always wanted that you don't have, we know how to get it. And we've done it. And we've done it by coming off the bench when that was called.
You know, you want to know what's crazy, though, is as athletes, we feel like when we on the field,
my dog, literally about to say the same thing.
That is our chance to win a championship. And you telling me that I'm about to be on the bench and we gonna win a championship? No. And if you watch Chris Paul's career, forget all the stats, forget all the All-Stars and top 75 team. He is a competitor. Like, Chris Paul don't mess around. There ain't a lot of smiles and giggles and all that on the court like all these other NBA players. Chris Paul, when he step on there, he like Russell Westbrook. It is time to go. You on the opposite team, I'm ready to compete. He is a competitor. This ain't gonna sit well with Chris Paul coming off the bench. That's not what he does. I don't care who's in front of me. When I'm on the court, my team is better. And that is not coming off the bench. This is gonna be a problem. And they ain't had the conversation with him yet. Obviously, the way he responded, Chris gonna be up out of there.
Joy, were you surprised? Because you've covered sports long enough to have seen several of these types of interactions.
He gonna be gone.
Were you surprised by Chris Paul's response to the reporters in that moment?
Yeah, kind of, because Chris Paul's a vet and he knows what saying these things means. That's what I'm saying. I love Summer League. People getting loose. Getting loose out here.
Vegas.
Yes. I mean, listen, it's got me once or twice. Or 5 or 10. But what James mentioned is the most important part of it. Him being a little snappy and stuff, okay, whatever. People do that. But he said that they hadn't talked about it.
It's been a minute, huh? Since the
Been
trade?
a while.
Like, what? What do you mean you haven't had that conversation?
But I have an idea, Joy. I have an idea. I think the reason they haven't talked about it is because you understand that this is an uncomfortable conversation that will not go well for anybody. Slick, I don't think you're incorrect in your thought process. I just think you're ignorant in your thought process to the fact of what James alluded to. Athletes believe they're better when they're on the field. Shady sits here most regularly, and Shady says when he went to Kansas City, and then won the Super Bowl. But then when he went to Tampa and won the Super Bowl, and Fournette was in front of him, and there was another rookie, it might have been Ronald Jones in front of him, he was like, wait a second now, I could do that.
Yeah.
That's how athletes think.
Yeah.
Whether they could or they couldn't, what makes most athletes great is they think they can. How do you think you're going to be better with me off the bench? It doesn't make sense.
But what to Slick's point, it's we love that for you. We love that you think that. It's gotten you this far.
Yep.
But what you do and what we do are two different things. Because we have these things, we got a lot of them. We're what's called a dynasty. You haven't been a part of that. And now you might be. So you can get on board with how we do things, or you can tank your legacy, and that's your choice. Because at the end of the day, their legacy is set. They have their championships. They're going into the Hall of Fame. They're part of the All-75 team. They don't need to prove anything to anyone. No.
Which ones, though? Because Chris doesn't.
Golden State. Oh, yes, he does. He needs a ring.
Hell yeah.
Oh, yes, he does.
Without
yes, he does. Yes, he does. He will go down as one of the greatest point guards of all time.
For sure.
Right.
Of course, all those things.
For sure.
How much would a ring?
But there's a
How much
difference
fetch?
between guys who have won rings and guys who haven't.
There absolutely is. But there's also a difference between what role you play, and I wish Shady was also here on
no,
that.
I agree. I agree.
Between what role you play.
Where else I would Slick again on that is we know that there is a certain level of respect for winning with Golden State if you do things the way that they do it. Like, I'm not going to think less of Chris Paul if he wins a ring with Golden State and comes off the bench and supplements what's happening.
But Chris might, though. Like, at the end of the day, as an athlete, when you go out there, like, if you don't feel like you're a part of winning the championship, that ring ain't gonna mean too much to you.
He's not like a mentor. That's not the same
Number
thing.
one, the conversation ain't been had because they know what type of player they dealing with. You dealing with a Hall of Fame player.
Sure.
So that's why the conversations ain't been had, because they probably still are in there trying to iron out the conversation
how we gonna do
this.
Right.
But
it's not just conversation. It's let's get on the floor. Who says that the Warriors have already decided he's coming off the bench?
he ain't, the way he just responded.
Oh, okay, but that's fine. But I guarantee you, as much as every athlete believes that, hey, we're better when I'm on the floor, and I would dare say when the ball's in my hands, somehow, some way,
No
like
doubt.
I am just not a ride-along here,
doubt,
right? Like
no
I can contribute to this.
No doubt.
There's also when you actually practice and you put things out there and you're asked to do certain things, and somebody else does it better.
Well, that's right. You can't fool players.
I'm telling you right now, that response right there is Steph better go to the 2, and I better go to the 1. We better figure out something else to do.
Clay can figure it out.
And I'll tell you what.
That's what that was.
It's very possible that the Warriors would do that in order to say, okay, and let's see where it goes.
And let's see how we play with that.
And let's see how it goes.
They at least gonna have to start like that.
Based on that response?
Based on that response, they're gonna have to start like that.
But I believe that in part, like what we're talking about, I guarantee you, the Warriors knew who they were getting. They knew his reputation. They knew his accomplishments. They were like, okay, how do we play this in order to make this work?
Subscribe here to get the latest from Speak, and go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.